Seattle is a depressing city. Any place that had a moment and then that moment faded is depressing. Detroit, Memphis, San Francisco. Seattle is small too, and you can walk everywhere, which is good because there's not a lot else to do there except drink and wring out your mop of fucking tears. I moved there after living in a punk warehouse in Oakland. The downstairs was AK Press, and next door was a dildo factory. The factory only made dildos in the shape of religious figures: God, Death, Abraham, Jesus, et al. They were awfully big though, I suppose, as they should have been. There was a wheelbarrow next to the entrance where they chucked all the defects. Half-melted God was piled upon discolored God. Whenever a new someone moved into the warehouse, they always grabbed a mound to decorate their frantically cordoned space. So every person who lived in this clapboard warren had a row of half-melted blasphemy dicks on their windowsill, if they had a window, or nightstand, made of a milk crate. I had one of the death ones. The one time I tried to use it on someone, he immediately yelled, "Take it out! Take it out!" It's not as bad now, but at that point, it was an incredibly bad neighborhood. There were lots of gangs, drugs, street prostitution, and homeless people. Mostly I was too dense to know how dangerous it was. Luckily, the worst thing that happened to me was that one night someone stole one of the headlights out of my minivan. Then 2 days later, they stole the other one. I was too broke to go to the dealership to replace them and found a pair in a junkyard. When I installed it, I did it wrong, and they pointed down, so only 5 feet in front of the van was illuminated. This was not unlike anything else. I started an unsuitable relationship with a 19-year-old named Lois who lived in Seattle and was even crazier than I was. It's a whole other long story, but my life was only pain, and I was looking for about anything. Lois came to visit for a few days. She took a bus all the way down, and while I was waiting for her to arrive, I snuck into a house where I used to live to take a nervous dump and clean it off in the shower. It didn't all come out when I was on the toilet, and I shit more when I was washing my wall. It took a long time to force it down the drain. When I arrived at the depot, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a willow reed lurch on a pair of very cheap, very red, very high heels, and I hoped it wasn't her, but it was. We had a nice time though, and I thought, fuck it. I quit my job with no notice, left my apartment with no notice, shaved my head down to the skin, and from one frying pan slum into another of flame, drove us up the west coast to her own flop house, 800 miles away. To try and work out the canopus and argus of chaos inside of me, I had been punching myself in the face a lot and had 2 black eyes and a big scab on the side of my nose. One of the teachers at the preschool where I worked started laughing when I showed up like this, saying I got my ass kicked. I told her my roommate's girlfriend was violent, and that when she threw canned food at her girlfriend, she hit me on accident. Shirt she bought me. I'm going to the bar. Are you going out to meet someone? What? No, I just shaved because it's hot. That shirt looks nice. The bar was as dopey and as crowded as possible. I pushed into the vague corner where I belonged and stood with a beer in each hand. I was wearing big headphones plugged into a blue Discman and tried to look any boy or any girl in the eye. In a short time, I gave in to the facts and was then holding 2 new beers. A not super attractive, out-of-shape frat girl walked up to me, pulled off my headphones, and asked me if I was alone. In the flesh, I said. She was as drunk as one would think and shook her head at me, sitting back down with her friends. After a few minutes, she walked up to the bartender and shout-slurred, "Hey, is that guy alone?" The bartender looked at me and laughed at us. In Seattle, every bartender is in a band that did not go anywhere, so they were all professional dicks instead. Her friend waved me over to the table and yelled, "She wants you to go home with her." We pounded our drinks, and she almost ran out the door. It was hard to keep up with her. Her little cube apartment was sincerely messy, and there were hockey and WNBA posters on the wall. It was the home of a squirrel. She told me I looked a lot older in the light. I felt embarrassed. There were no sheets on the bed, and we got on it. She took off her pants and clothes. She had a perfectly hairless pussy, which was more unusual then than it is now. I told her how hot it was, and she put her finger to her lips and said in a rising tone, "Quiet, quiet, quiet." Her skin was axolotl pale and slithered with nebulas of blue and green veins. They were not bumpy like varicose veins, but you could see them smooth and all over and under her Kleenex wrapping. She kind of sleepily sucked me off for 30 seconds and then pushed my head to the pole. Her bed was next to the fridge, and while I was trying to make something happen, she reached in and got out a frozen pizza and started eating it. These 2 activities went on together for a little while, and I was praying she would not rest the pizza on my head like a desk. I sat up, and with her mouth full, she asked me if I came. Pizza lady went blind into her still frozen pizza. I bundled up my clothes, left without saying goodbye, and got dressed in the hallway. The only thing that made sense, now and forever, was being more drunk. Lois was still in bed watching TV. The sweat outside did not make anything easier to forget. I took a beer out of her hand, drank it as fast as I could, and sat down on the damp floor. The Claremont. There was a strip club in Atlanta that shared a building with a halfway house. It might not be there anymore, but it probably is. Women who live in the halfway house also work at the club. The dancers there have lives and have bodies you don't normally see naked on a stage. I have never been there without something ludicrous happening. We had played an early show, so the rest of the night was free. The other bands on the tour wanted to have some fun, and the Claremont blew its clarinet. As we entered, there was a woman on the stage who weighed 500 pounds. She was called Hamburger Mary and was famous at the club. The stage is very small and above and behind the bar. It is round and surrounded by all the bottles. The bartender works in front of it. Hamburger Mary did not have a lot of space to do her thing. She slid and rippled pretty unevenly to the music. It was chaotic and mesmerizing. Smirks all around the room, everyone's id unraveled to the bedlam of curious pain and bad news. It was the first tour I ever made a little money. This was a new experience, and I did not know what to do with it, so I crammed it all in the front zipper pocket of a pullover windbreaker I had. When I wore it, the ball of money made me look like I was stealing a roll of paper towels. As my friends were settling in, I was possessed by a need to count this money. This happens on low-rent tours as your mind starts to fatigue. You need some reinforcement of the days going by and a quantified reminder that it has an end and future purpose. In the back corner of a club was a young muscle guy, obviously on angel dust, grabbing the back of a chair over and over again and slamming it down. I had seen him there before working as a bouncer, but he just seemed to be a customer that night. We sat as far from him as we could, and I decided to hide in the kitchen to count my loot so no one could see me. The whole idea was incredibly stupid and juvenile. I started to lay the bills out across the top of a chest freezer until I heard the breathing of the elephant smasher. The angel dust dude had followed me back there. I could fucking kill you right now. His eyes were half open and googling in circles. I'm sure you could. I like that money, and I like to kill, and I could kill you easily. I felt like I was caught eating cheap sweet and sour pork over a sink filled with piss. He screamed a high-pitched scream in my face and then started cackling. Time had stopped, and my mind had stopped. He grabbed a $20 bill, lit it with a lighter, and then waved it in front of his eyes for a long time. He walked out of the kitchen, led by the flame. By now, my sleepless, naive idiocy was quite cleared away, and I ran back to my friends' tables, thanking God. The stage was now owned by a natural and curvy, 1955-looking blonde woman with one arm that stopped at the elbow. She was somehow conducting a wider grind than the little stage was made to fit. It was impressive. We all clapped and cheered. We ordered drinks, relaxed a little, and started to talk. After about 10 minutes, we heard a crashing and shouting and turned to see the angel dust guy standing in front of the bar, grabbing the leg of the blonde dancer and punching her in the stomach. The bartender was waving a baseball bat in his face, and the bouncer who was actually working the door that night was yelling, "Marcus, stop! Marcus, stop!" The dancer was trying not to fall onto the bottles each time she was punched. As if ear-flicked by a demon, Marcus suddenly let her go, leapt off the bar, and ran out the door. This event did not disrupt the flow of the night hardly at all, and after a 30-second pause of, "Whoa, that was crazy," people went back to what they were doing before. The music never stopped playing, and the bartender helped the dancer who was beat on down from the stage, and the bouncer resumed sitting on his stool by the door. On stage next was a woman who was severely anorexic, junked out, and wearing an Elvira wig that was way too loose and too big for her head. The bass player in one of the bands we were on tour with was an exotic dancer for her regular job and had more insight into the place than the rest of us. She, of course, was totally in love with it and buying well drinks for all to celebrate the other side of the looking glass. At this time, I usually only drank beer and wine and didn't have a clear sense of what 6 or 7 shots right after each other meant. My insides started to feel newly undead and began to disobey. Over the music from the stage, we heard the karaoke machine turn on and a horror show voice singing an Alice in Chains song. Marcus had come back in. He was holding the mic in his fist like a hammer, and no one did anything. There were 2 parallel universes stacked on top of each other and stacked on the edge. The dancer danced her awful dance in her Baphomet wig, and the singer sang his awful song in his Baphomet voice. When he was done, he ran out the door again. The bartender waited a minute and then packed away his bat and the offensive machine. As part of her recognition of the night's black magic, my friend who had gotten me too drunk decided I needed a lap dance. I could neither accept nor refuse. I saw her talking to a dancer and then point to me. From across the room, I could see she was tall, with long brown hair, wearing a garter belt, stockings, and panties, but naked other than that. I was too faded to feel aroused, but faded enough to feel philosophical and bemused. My friend was smiling a huge smile. 2 cigarettes were hanging out of her mouth as she watched the dancer straddle me and squished down onto my lap. The dancer's face had been severely burned. She had almost no nose, just 2 holes, no upper lip, and 1 eye that was almost completely grown over with wrinkled skin. Her body was very nice. I found out later that she was called the 50-foot Fakeout. From far away she looked great, etc. A song she liked came on, and she shimmied an excited shimmy. Her arms were around my neck, and her body was pressed into my face. The room began to spin, and I threw up all over her tits. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," I said. "It's not you, it's not you." She looked at me with no expression. "Give me $50, she said in a croaking voice. I handed it over. The bouncer was standing next to us by now and seemed jaded out of his mind. Like a cartoon, he grabbed me by the back of my collar and chucked me out the door. My friends followed me and were laughing so hard 2 of them were lying on the pavement in the parking lot. The bounce man said quietly, "Please get out of here." We drove to the punk house where all 8 of us were going to sleep. When I got there, someone handed me a cheap plastic bottle of raspberry gin, held my hands, and lifted it to my mouth. I began to shake and then could not see. Part of me remembers lying down in a bathtub, retching to black out, being doused with water and endless streams of dusty snot pouring out of my nose. The woman who said we could sleep at the house was apparitionally sitting on the edge of the tub, keeping me from choking when she lifted my head to the faucet so I could drink and cool down. I was wearing a shirt from one of the bands we were on tour with and took it off to mop up the snot from my face. It was all in my eyes and mouth. The band was particularly twee, and the shirt was pink and had a little radio drawn on it, in every way perfect for this fate. When I woke up, I was face down on the porch outside on a layer of old towels. I had shit and pissed in my pants, and no one wanted to deal with it. I was soaking wet with sweat from my gross body, dew from the morning's rebirth, and holy water from the tub. My guardian angel was asleep in a deck chair and woke up when I did. "You had really bad alcohol poisoning, and I didn't want to be known as the lady who killed your band." This woman who kept me from dying went on to later become the tour manager for Huey Lewis and the News. The shirt I had used to wipe the snot from my face had been tossed onto the grass and formed a dank clot. I took off my remaining clothes, put them in the trash, and stood naked in the yard using a hose to clean myself. Convulsing from the cold and the yucky party still inside me, I took the bottom towel that had none of my shit on it, dried off, and slept in the van. The singer from the band whose shirt I left on the grass found it there. He was very tall and heavy, and I had a flash memory of seeing him fucking a girl on top of a sleeping bag. His ass was like a casserole pan with two halves of hairy cantaloupe glued to it. He washed the shirt and sold it at his merch table like regular.